The skies over Earth were not like any the world had ever seen before. Massive starships, gleaming, cold, and impossibly sleek, moved across the atmosphere, casting shadows over entire continents. Their shapes were unlike anything humans had ever encountered, with jagged edges that seemed to pulse with an eerie, unnatural glow. The world held its breath as the first transmission crackled through every screen on the planet. This is the Galactic Empire. We offer humanity a choice. Submit to our dominion, or face extinction. A chill ran through every human heart, but it wasn't fear. It was the quiet stirrings of curiosity, mingled with a strange, bubbling sense of defiance. Earth's leaders gathered in a global summit, broadcast live to every corner of the world, to discuss this unprecedented moment. What were these beings? Why were they here? But before any official talks could begin, the transmission was interrupted, and there he stood, Executor Zoreth, the Empire's envoy. His form shimmered as if his very presence bent the space around him, a tall, pale figure clad in an ornate suit of silver and black armor. His voice rang out, smooth, cold, and dripping with arrogance. Humanity, the might of the Galactic Empire has come. Kneel, and you shall be granted a place among the stars. Refuse, and the consequences will be dire. The world waited, eyes glued to the screens, hearts racing in anticipation of what would come next. Yet, as Zoreth's image flickered before them, something strange happened. The leaders of Earth, gathered in a single massive room, broke into laughter. The camera zoomed in on the faces of world leaders, from the President of the United States to the Chancellor of the European Union, their faces twisted in disbelief, then pure, unfiltered amusement. The laugh was almost primal, spontaneous, and filled with a mix of nervousness and something else. One of the leaders, a woman with silver hair, wiped a tear from her eye, glancing up at Zoreth's hologram as she chuckled. "Is this some kind of joke?" she asked, her voice dripping with incredulity. "You think you can just waltz in here and make demands?" A murmur rippled through the crowd of dignitaries, growing louder as more voices joined in. Zoreth's expression remained impassive, but his eyes flickered, betraying the faintest sign of irritation. "You laugh." His voice, cold as ice, sent shivers down the spine of anyone who was watching. "You mock the might of the Empire." And that's when the second shock came. Humanity wasn't done laughing. The leaders continued to mock and jeer, as if this was the most absurd thing they had ever witnessed. From across the globe, citizens gathered in stadiums, towns, and cities, watching the live broadcast, their faces a mixture of astonishment and defiance. Even the youngest, who'd never known war, were swept up in the wave of disbelief. One by one, they too began to laugh, not out of fear, but out of something else, something that began to burn like a fire in their chests. Disrespect. The greatest form of resistance, the simplest challenge to the arrogance of a foreign invader, was humor. Zoreth's lips tightened. What he had thought would be an easy submission, an empire's offer of power, had turned into a universal mockery. For the first time in his long career, he felt a flicker of doubt. These humans, they were not like any species he had encountered. How had they not bowed? How had they not trembled at the sight of his superiority? "You have made a grave mistake," Zoreth warned, his voice now laced with barely contained anger. "We will give you one more chance, Earth. You will bow, or we will wipe your cities from the face of this planet." The laughter didn't stop. Instead, it grew. It echoed from every corner of the Earth. Zoreth stood still, his piercing eyes fixed on the screen. Somewhere deep in his chest, something unfamiliar stirred, a growing realization that this would not be as simple as he had anticipated. And so, the stage was set. The Galactic Empire, an invincible force with millennia of history, had encountered the first species that wasn't impressed by their power. The first species who, instead of cowering, had laughed in their face. Now the question loomed, what would humanity do next? Would they bend, or would they respond with something far more dangerous than simple defiance? The world waited, the suspense thick in the air. The laughter faded, but its echo lingered in the air. The humans' defiance was palpable, crackling through the atmosphere like static before a storm. Zorath's hologram flickered again, his expression twisted with a simmering rage that even his immaculate composure couldn't disguise. His cold eyes glinted as he stared at the leaders of Earth, his gaze sharp enough to slice through steel. This was no longer just about diplomacy. This was a test of survival. "You mock me, humans." Zorath's voice was low, each word deliberately measured. "You will regret this insolence. We shall offer you a challenge, an intellectual one. You will face the greatest minds of the Galactic Empire in a contest of strategy, wit, and intellect. If you succeed, you may live. If you fail, you will kneel or you will die." The silence that followed was deafening. Every nation, every media outlet across the globe broadcasted the challenge in real time. The stakes had just risen higher than anyone could have predicted. The human race was being tested, not by force, but by their minds. The whole world now waited, with bated breath, for their response. And then, with eerie calm, the leaders of Earth spoke in unison. "We accept." The challenge was simple on the surface, a series of complex games, each designed to test the intellect and creativity of its participants. The Empire's best strategists and tacticians would face off against humanity's finest minds in a battle of sheer brainpower. Zorath, who had seen entire civilizations crumble with his intellect alone, assumed that this would be nothing more than a formality. Humanity, he was sure, would be crushed under the weight of the Empire's brilliance. But what he didn't expect was the wild card the humans always carried, their boundless unpredictability. The first round began. The game was a centuries-old Empire invention, a game of galactic chess, where every piece represented an entire fleet of ships, each capable of devastating the star system. The rules were simple. Defeat your opponent by placing your fleet into the heart of their defense. The Empire's experts, each handpicked from the highest echelons of power, sat confidently at their consoles, their fingers hovering over glowing panels. Their minds worked like machines, calculating every move with the precision of a laser. Humanity's champion was a woman named Eliza Trent, a 32-year-old former astrophysicist turned strategy expert. Her background was nowhere near as impressive as her Empire counterparts, but she had something they didn't, an unorthodox mind that operated outside the boundaries of conventional thought. As the game commenced, her first move shocked the Empire delegates. Rather than playing for the center, as was the norm, she deployed her forces in an unexpected flanking maneuver, one that used their own momentum against them. The move was so audacious that Zorath almost spoke out, but he held his tongue. The seconds ticked by, and tension rippled through the viewing rooms. The humans were playing the game differently, wildly. Zorath's eyes narrowed as he watched Eliza's moves unfold. She wasn't following the rules. She was rewriting them. The Empire's elite strategists grew visibly uneasy, their calm faces faltering for the first time. Each time they countered, Eliza anticipated it with something they couldn't foresee, a solution that bent the rules in a way that no one could have imagined. Then came the pivotal moment. A sudden, unexpected move from Eliza sent her fleet hurtling straight for the Empire's queen piece, breaking the game's conventional flow and striking directly at the Empire's most important defensive point. Zorath's expression shifted from cool arrogance to one of pure shock. This wasn't supposed to happen. The humans weren't just playing the game, they were hacking it. The room fell into stunned silence. The Empire's brightest minds, those who had crushed the hopes of entire civilizations, found themselves on the edge of defeat. A flicker of doubt ignited in Zorath's mind. Could it be possible? Were these humans really as unpredictable and dangerous as they seemed? Could they really bend the fabric of logic itself to their will? The final move was made. The game was over. Eliza Trent stood up, her gaze steady and unyielding. As the last piece fell into place, she had won. For a brief, heart-stopping moment, there was no sound, only the reverberation of humanity's audacity ringing across the galaxy. Zorath's eyes locked onto the screen, his mind racing. This wasn't just a victory in a game, it was a statement. Humanity had just thrown down the gauntlet, and they had done it in a way the Empire had never expected. Zorath's fingers twitched with barely contained rage, but it was more than just anger. It was the cold realization that humanity had just become something more than a nuisance. They had become a threat. "This was only the first trial," he said, his voice betraying no emotion, but his words rang with a weight that made the entire galaxy pause. "Prepare for what comes next." As Zorath's image faded, the world collectively held its breath, the suspense hanging thick in the air. What had started as a challenge was now a war of minds, and the humans had won the first battle. But as the tension grew, one question echoed in every heart. Could humanity continue to outwit an empire that had crushed every civilization it had ever encountered? The tension was electric in the aftermath of the intellectual victory. Humanity had won the first trial, but there was no time to savor the triumph. Zorath's expression, unreadable as ever, remained fixed on the humans across the galaxy. This was just a game, he had declared coldly, but everyone knew the stakes had already escalated beyond anything anticipated. He was not just angry, he was rattled. And that, more than anything, made him dangerous. "You will now face the true test," Zorath continued. "The War Games, a simulated battle between your forces and the might of the Empire's greatest generals. If you succeed here, I will admit to the potential of your species. Fail, and Earth will suffer the consequences." The announcement hit like a punch. It was no longer about games of intellect. It was real. Zorath had called for a war simulation, but there was no illusion about what this meant. This would be a battle of survival. Humanity had outsmarted the Empire once, but could they truly stand against its might in the theater of war? Within hours, Earth's military leaders were scrambling to organize a defense. This wasn't just about strategy, it was about their very survival. The world's armies, divided but united in the face of this unimaginable threat, mobilized as never before. But there was one catch. Humanity had never faced an enemy like this. The Galactic Empire's forces were legendary, indestructible, vast, and equipped with weapons that could vaporize cities with a single shot. The odds were stacked impossibly high. Inside Earth's war room, a somber mood filled the air. Major General Marcus Carter, Earth's foremost military strategist, stood before a massive digital map, analyzing the Empire's assault plan. "We can't beat them head-on," he said, voice low but firm. "But we can outthink them. We need to fight in ways they've never expected. If we win this, we'll prove that we can survive anything." The world held its breath as the war games began. The simulation started with the Empire's fleet descending on Earth in force, a vast armada of warships so advanced their weapons could destroy continents. On Earth's side, the defenses were a patchwork of old military technologies, hastily upgraded to combat the unknown. For the Empire, it was a simple, clean sweep: crush the planet, wipe out the resistance, and subjugate the humans once and for all. But humanity had one weapon the Empire couldn't anticipate: ingenuity. General Carter's first order was unorthodox. Instead of rallying a direct defense, he ordered his fleet to scatter, breaking into smaller, highly mobile units that could evade the Empire's sensors. "Let them think we're weaker than we are," he instructed. "We want them to underestimate us." The Empire's forces, confident in their superiority, did exactly that. They charged in, expecting Earth to buckle under the weight of their technology. But what they didn't count on was humanity's relentless will to survive. Earth's first surprise attack came in the form of an electromagnetic pulse, primitive by the Empire's standards, but effective in disabling key sections of the Empire's fleet. Suddenly, Zorath's forces were blind, their communications scrambled, and their superior weapons were turned off, leaving them vulnerable. The humans didn't stop there. Using guerrilla tactics, They launched lightning-fast strikes on the Empire's supply lines, damaging key components of their war machines. The Empire retaliated, launching devastating counterstrikes, but Earth's military adapted, regrouping in unexpected locations, attacking from every angle. As each wave of attacks landed, the Empire's generals began to falter. They were used to overwhelming force, to total dominance, but the humans were showing them something they had never encountered: resourcefulness. With each passing moment, the suspense grew. Would the humans' unorthodox tactics truly be enough to win this war simulation? Would Earth be able to survive against the unrelenting onslaught of the Empire? Every moment felt like it could be the last, as each side pushed the limits of what they thought possible. Zorath, from his command center, gripped the armrest of his chair so tightly that his knuckles turned white. He was seething. The humans were not supposed to do this. This wasn't how things were meant to unfold. As the final hours of the war games approached, Earth had gained a shocking edge. The Empire's fleet, which had been certain of victory, was now battered, losing critical assets one by one. In a bold move, Carter ordered his forces to launch a final assault, one that would strike directly at the heart of the Empire's flagship, a ship that housed Zorath himself. The tension in the air was almost unbearable as Earth's forces converged on the flagship, preparing for a final desperate attempt at victory. The Empire, caught off guard, scrambled to respond, but Zorath's face, usually a mask of indifference, now twisted in disbelief. No, this cannot be happening. The humans, not just fighting for survival, but for their pride, were on the verge of pulling off the impossible. The climax of the war games was closing in, and the twist was too dramatic to ignore. Humanity wasn't just surviving. They were winning. The final seconds ticked down. Would humanity's relentless drive be enough to bring the Galactic Empire to its knees? Or would Zorath's forces crush them at the last moment? The fate of Earth and the galaxy hung in the balance. The final moments of the war games felt like the world was holding its breath. Earth's forces were closing in on the Empire's flagship, a behemoth that symbolized the vast power of the Galactic Empire. Every move, every tactic had led to this moment. Humanity had pulled off the impossible, fighting not with advanced weapons or overwhelming force, but with sheer resourcefulness. And now, with Zorath's flagship under direct assault, the humans were on the cusp of victory. Yet, just as victory seemed within reach, an unexpected transmission cut through the chaos. A sharp, urgent message from Earth's deep space defense network. The voice that came through was panicked, strained, and clearly in distress. "General Carter, you need to hear this. It's not over." Carter's eyes narrowed as the voice continued, a tremor in the background, making it clear that something was terribly wrong. "We've just detected an anomaly. An incoming fleet, far more advanced than anything the Empire has deployed. We don't know where they're from, but they're coming in fast. We don't have time." A cold chill swept over the room. The war games, the galaxy-spanning battle that had seemed so important, was suddenly overshadowed by a far greater threat. Carter's mind raced. Who could this new force be? And why hadn't they shown up sooner? The Empire's flagship was still in jeopardy, but now Earth's forces were divided. They couldn't just focus on the victory they had almost secured. They had to contend with this new, unknown enemy that was coming for them at full speed. "What's their strength?" Carter barked, his voice steely as he turned to his staff. "How long do we have?" "Less than an hour. They're already in our solar system. They're ships. They're unlike anything we've seen before. They're not following the same energy patterns as the Empire's fleets." The tension in the air shifted, turning from a feeling of victory to one of palpable dread. The humans weren't the only ones surprised by the Empire. They had just discovered that they were not the only unknown force in the galaxy. An even greater, more terrifying power was on the way, and it was headed straight for Earth. Carter quickly gathered his top advisors, his mind already working on how to deal with this new threat. "We can't split our forces. The Empire will take advantage of any distraction. We need to finish the war games before this new fleet arrives, or it'll be too late. But just as he was about to issue further orders, the lights in the command center flickered, and a loud hum filled the room. The screens went black for a split second, and then, static. The transmission from the defense network was cut off. No, 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 get it back online, Carter snapped. The room erupted into chaos as technicians scrambled, but the screens remained dead. Something was jamming their communication. Whatever was coming, it was starting to make its presence known in ways that couldn't be ignored. Carter, we can't delay any longer, one of the officers said, her voice tight with urgency. We have to make a decision now. He glanced at the map of the solar system, his mind racing. His strategy was to focus on the Empire's flagship, but with this new threat arriving, would it even matter if they won the war games? The Empire, no matter how humiliated they were by humanity's resilience, could still destroy them all. And now this mysterious new enemy could be even worse. The countdown to Earth's potential victory was ticking down, but the countdown to humanity's ultimate survival had just begun. Suddenly, without warning, the skies above Earth erupted. Massive energy pulses, nearly invisible to the naked eye, but undeniable in their intensity, lanced across the atmosphere. And then, in a single breath, the unimaginable happened. A ship, no, an entire fleet, appeared out of nowhere, descending upon Earth with terrifying speed. Their ships were sleek, darker than the deepest space, shimmering with an eerie black light that seemed to distort the air around them. They didn't look like any species the Empire had ever encountered, and they weren't making demands. They were making war. And at the center of this fleet was a ship unlike anything seen before. A jagged, impossibly large vessel that seemed to pulse with a dark energy, its silhouette sharp against the backdrop of Earth's atmosphere. The moment it arrived, every defensive measure on Earth's side went haywire, as if this fleet was emitting a field that short-circuited their very systems. "This is not part of the simulation," Carter muttered under his breath, his voice barely audible. The words felt like a death sentence. Zorath's transmission, which had been on the verge of collapse under the pressure of the war games, came back online. His face, usually the picture of composure, was now filled with confusion. And something else. Fear. This was not supposed to happen. And that was when Carter realized the truth. Zorath wasn't the true threat. His empire might have been vast, but this new force was far more terrifying than the Galactic Empire ever could be. The war games had been a mere prelude. The real battle for Earth had just begun. The skies above Earth darkened as the alien fleet descended. Every heart on the planet stopped in unison. The sight of the massive, jagged ships cutting through the atmosphere, sending a ripple of terror through every person watching. They didn't just appear out of nowhere. They ripped through reality itself, as if space and time bent and twisted in their wake. The air hummed with unnatural energy, and the faint crackling sound of their ships reverberated across the planet. No one had seen ships like this before. No one had seen power like this. The defense systems Earth had barely managed to assemble for the Empire's war games were useless against this new enemy. The electromagnetic pulses that had given them an advantage over the Empire's fleets had no effect on these ships. The ancient weapons of Earth's military, though formidable, were now nothing more than toys against this unearthly force. In the heart of Earth's military command center, General Marcus Carter clenched his fists, staring at the monitors as the unknown fleet materialized in full force. The eerie ships blotted out the stars, their twisted, organic design unlike anything the Empire had ever fielded. Each ship seemed to pulse with a dark energy, as though it were alive, breathing. And worse, the fleet wasn't just descending toward Earth, it was locking in on the planet's orbit with terrifying precision. "What the hell are they?" Carter muttered under his breath, his eyes narrowing in disbelief. There were no answers, only a rising sense of dread. Zorath's face appeared on the screen once more, his expression now filled with a stark, unrecognizable emotion. Gone was the smug arrogance that had dominated the Galactic Empire's interactions. Instead, there was a cold, penetrating fear. "You have no idea what you've unleashed, humans." The words sent a chill through the entire command room. This wasn't the confident Zorath they'd seen before. This was a Zorath who feared what was about to come. They are known as the Shroud, a species older than the Empire itself. Their fleet exists in a different dimension, one where time and space do not obey the same rules. They've come to claim what is theirs. And you are nothing but an obstacle. The room fell silent. Earth's military leadership had just been told the impossible. The Galactic Empire, an entity that had crushed civilizations across the galaxy, was terrified of these beings. "The Shroud," Carter repeated under his breath, turning to his tactical officers. "I don't care who or what they are. We fight. Now." The problem, however, was the Shroud didn't fight in the traditional sense. As their ships continued to approach, strange, swirling energy fields began to envelop Earth's atmosphere, distorting everything in their wake. The power of the planet's defenses flickered and failed, one by one. It was as if the Shroud were warping reality itself, bending the laws of physics to their will. "This is not a battle you can win, General." Zorath's voice came again, his eyes full of resignation. "I warned you that you would be tested. But the Shroud are not to be trifled with. You are facing extinction." A loud crack echoed through the command center as a blinding light erupted from the sky. The first wave of Shroud forces had arrived. The ships didn't land. They simply appeared over cities, displacing air and energy as they phased into existence, leaving behind distortion and chaos. From these ships, strange, shifting silhouettes emerged, beings cloaked in shadows, their forms constantly in motion, their features almost impossible to make out. The only certainty was that they weren't human. The first wave of the Shroud's attack was swift and devastating. Cities that had been fortified with Earth's best technologies, their last line of defense, were obliterated in an instant. No explosions, no fireball to mark the end, just the sudden collapse of entire structures into nothingness, as if the very fabric of existence had been unmade. "Retreat. All forces, retreat," Carter shouted as the images of destruction flashed across the screen. His voice was raw, but there was no choice. There was no way to stop this invasion head-on. The Shroud didn't follow the rules of conventional war. They followed no rules at all. But humanity wasn't ready to give up. Despite the overwhelming force before them, despite the destruction already unfolding, Earth's leaders knew they had one weapon left: resilience, a force stronger than any weapon, a resolve that no empire, no alien race could snuff out. Yet, even as humanity prepared to make their final stand, a new and terrifying realization struck. The Shroud weren't just here to conquer. They weren't interested in Earth's resources or enslaving its people. They had come for something much darker. The transmission from Zorath flickered again, this time with an almost frantic tone. "They're here for you. They've come for humanity, not to conquer you, but to wipe you from existence itself. There is no escape. They want you dead." The chilling words sent a wave of panic through Earth's leaders, but also a terrible understanding. This was no longer a war for survival. This was a war for annihilation. The clock was ticking. And now, humanity had no choice but to face the most terrifying question of all. Could they survive an enemy who didn't just want to win, but to erase them from the very fabric of the universe? The world had plunged into chaos, but amidst the growing terror, one thing was clear. Humanity was fighting not just for survival, but for its very place in existence. The Shroud, a force beyond comprehension, had arrived not to conquer but to erase, to undo everything humanity had ever built. Cities were disappearing in moments, and the air itself felt thick with the tension of impending oblivion. General Carter stood in the command center, his mind racing. The Shroud ships hovered over Earth like dark clouds, their destructive power incomprehensible. Zorath's warning echoed in his mind. They've come to erase you. There's no escape. The images on the screens showed destruction, entire regions of the planet being swallowed up by the shroud's energy pulses, the light of existence bending as if the very laws of physics were being rewritten. The alien fleet's presence was as cold and inevitable as death itself. There was no running, no hiding. Humanity was facing an enemy that didn't just conquer, it erased history. General Carter. The voice cut through the dark silence, pulling Carter back into focus. It was Colonel Sarah Wells, the commander of Earth's remaining defense forces. We need to act now, or it's over. We can't win this with conventional weapons, but we might be able to slow them down. Maybe give us enough time to figure out a way to fight back. Carter's eyes locked onto the map of Earth, displayed on the main screen. The Shroud fleet was slowly enveloping the planet's surface, their ships drifting like predators circling their prey. They didn't seem to hurry, confident that humanity was already defeated, but Carter could feel a flicker of defiance burning inside him. "Tell me what you've got, Colonel," he said, voice low but steady. "We've been working on a last-ditch weapon, a quantum destabilizer. It's risky. We don't know if it'll even work, but if it does, it could disrupt the Shroud's entire fleet. We can't target individual ships. They're shifting between dimensions. But if we fire on their central flagship, we might cause a ripple effect that could send their whole fleet back to whatever hell they came from." Carter's heart raced. This could be their only chance. But it was a long shot. A weapon designed to disrupt space-time itself, with no guarantee of success. "Get it ready," he said, his jaw tight. "And get it ready fast. We don't have much time." As the weapon was prepared, Carter turned to the map again, watching the Shroud's movements. The alien ships hovered, as if studying the planet, or perhaps savoring the destruction they were unleashing. He couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't just attacking, they were playing a game, observing the humans' response to their power. But there was something else, too, something Carter couldn't explain. Every time he saw the Shroud ships pulse with dark energy, he felt a nagging sensation at the back of his mind. What were they really after? The quantum destabilizer hummed to life, its core crackling with unstable energy. It was humanity's last-ditch effort. The weapon had been designed in secret, a project born out of desperation. It was humanity's wildest gamble, but the only option left to them. Carter's voice was firm as he gave the command. "Fire." The blast shot out, a beam of energy so intense it threatened to tear apart the very fabric of space around it. It streaked through the sky toward the Shroud's flagship, which loomed over the planet like a black sun. For a split second, everything seemed to hold still. The beam collided with the flagship, and then, with a deafening crack, the ship exploded in a burst of dark energy. The ripple of the explosion sent shockwaves through the atmosphere, disrupting the Shroud's entire fleet. The alien ships staggered, their formation fracturing, the darkness that had once seemed invincible now swirling with chaotic energy. For a fleeting moment, there was hope. But then, to Carter's horror, something worse happened. The explosion didn't send the Shroud back to their dimension. It opened a rift, a tear in the very fabric of reality itself. And from that rift, something emerged that made every person in the command center freeze in terror. A new force, even darker and more oppressive than the Shroud, began to spill through the rift. It wasn't just one ship or one being. It was Legion. The Shroud had a master, something far beyond what even Zorath had warned about. "What the hell is that?" Wells breathed, her eyes wide with disbelief. From the rift, a massive, towering entity began to take shape. Its form was colossal, indistinct, shadowy, but pulsating with a malevolent energy that seemed to warp the very air around it. And as it emerged, the Shroud fleet, still reeling from the destabilizer's blast, began to fall into line behind the new arrival. The rift widened, and more of these entities, dark, incomprehensible, and terrifying, began to pour through, their forms twisting in ways that defied understanding. The sky above Earth was now filled with rifts, black tendrils of energy reaching down like veins in the body of some cosmic beast. Carter's stomach churned as the realization hit him. The Shroud were nothing more than messengers. This new force was the true threat, and it was here to finish what the Shroud had started. "We've unleashed hell," Carter whispered, as the full horror of what they were facing began to sink in. And in that instant, humanity's war for survival had just become a battle for the very existence of reality itself. The sky above Earth had become a canvas of terror. The Shroud, now revealed as mere servants to an ancient and incomprehensible force, retreated into the shadows as their dark master stepped forth. The rift, wide and swirling, pulsed like an open wound in the fabric of reality, spilling forth more of the nightmarish entities that now flooded the heavens. General Carter stood frozen, his gaze locked on the new monstrosity taking form above them. It was as though the very concept of existence was being rewritten. The giant shape, an amalgamation of shadow and twisted light, loomed above the planet like a living eclipse, casting an unnatural pall over the Earth. It was too big to be real, too alien to comprehend, and its presence bent the very air around it. Carter couldn't even find the words to describe it. It was beyond anything his mind could grasp. "General," Colonel Wells said quietly, her voice strained with disbelief, "what do we do now? We've never seen anything like this before." Carter felt a sickening tightness in his chest. This was no longer just about humanity's survival. This was about whether reality itself would even hold together. The rift was spreading. The entity at its center, something like a cosmic emperor, was unfolding its power with terrifying ease. Time itself seemed to warp under its influence, making it feel as though the very seconds were stretching and collapsing. Every moment felt like an eternity, and every heartbeat like the last. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed across the command center, and the room was flooded with the sound of static. A new transmission came through, distorted, garbled, but unmistakable. Zorath's face appeared once again on the screen. But unlike before, the smirk and arrogance had vanished. His expression was hollow, consumed by a deep, dread-filled emptiness. "You don't understand, Carter." Zorath's voice trembled through the comms. "This isn't a battle for your planet, or even for your people. This is a battle for existence itself." Carter's eyes narrowed. Zorath's words didn't make sense. This was just another alien invasion, wasn't it? This entity, the one you're seeing now, it's older than the Empire, older than anything you've ever known. It is not bound by the laws of the galaxy, or even by time. It is the beginning and the end. It has erased worlds, entire civilizations, from history, before the Empire, before the Shroud. Carter felt a chill crawl down his spine. The true nature of their enemy was still slipping through his fingers, elusive and incomprehensible. "You cannot defeat it, Carter," Zorath continued, his tone now desperate, almost pleading. "I tried to stop it, but I failed. We all failed. The Shroud are merely a herald, a prelude. You must understand, this force is not interested in your war. It only wants the end, the extinction of all that exists." The transmission flickered and died, leaving only silence in its wake. Carter stood motionless. The weight of Zorath's words hit him like a physical blow. This wasn't just a battle to save Earth or humanity. It was a fight to preserve the very concept of existence. The entity above them was not a conqueror. It was a destroyer, a force that had wiped away the histories of entire galaxies, erasing all traces of life as if they had never been. "What do we do now?" Wells whispered again, her voice tight with a mix of fear and hopelessness. The room was filled with a heavy, suffocating silence. Carter's mind raced, fighting to make sense of the impossible. He couldn't accept this. Not yet. They couldn't just give up. But what could they do against something that bent reality to its will? "There's one last thing," Carter said, his voice steady despite the rising panic in his chest. The quantum destabilizer, it wasn't just a weapon. It was an experiment, one last-ditch attempt to alter the fabric of space-time. If we can amplify the blast, if we can somehow direct it at the rift itself, it might not just disrupt their fleet, it might collapse the rift entirely. Close it for good. But Wells shook her head. General, even if we could somehow amplify the destabilizer, the rift is already widening. The entity is feeding off of it. We don't know what will happen if we interfere now. It cold. It could kill us all. Carter finished for her, his eyes narrowing as he stared at the map. The expanding rift a constant reminder of their dwindling time. Suddenly, a technician shouted from across the room, drawing everyone's attention. General, the entity, its influence is spreading faster than we thought. It's already affecting the planet's core. Everything's destabilizing. We've got minutes, not hours. Wells met Carter's eyes. There was only one choice left, no matter the risks. They would fight back with everything they had, or the world would cease to exist as they knew it. With a deep breath, Carter looked at his team. Prepare the destabilizer. This is humanity's final stand. As they rushed to carry out the plan, Carter turned his gaze upward, to the looming entity in the sky. The rift was growing, and with it, the feeling of inevitability. But as the final moments of preparation began, one burning thought consumed his mind. They had to stop it. They couldn't let the universe forget humanity. And if that meant defying the very laws of existence itself, so be it. The final moments were upon them. General Carter stood at the helm of humanity's last defense, the quantum destabilizer humming with unstable energy. Time had stretched to an unbearable crawl, the seconds slipping away as the dark entity above Earth twisted and writhed, its form becoming more grotesque with every heartbeat. Reality itself seemed to bend around it, flickering like a dying light. General, we're ready. Colonel Wells's voice cut through the tense atmosphere. She stood beside him, her face etched with both determination and terror. Earth's remaining forces had positioned themselves around the destabilizer, but their mission was clear. The rift had to be closed, or they would all be swept into oblivion. Carter nodded, his mind focused on the task ahead. There was no turning back now. The rift was widening too quickly, consuming everything in its path. The entities that poured through were no longer just watching. They were spreading across the globe, twisting the air and distorting reality, turning once thriving cities into smoldering husks of nothingness. With a deep breath, Carter turned to the team. Activate the amplifiers, he commanded. The destabilizer's core pulsed in response, sending shockwaves through the command center. The technology hummed louder, the air around it crackling with energy as the massive weapon began to amplify its power. Every person in the room could feel the charge building, the raw potential vibrating through their bones. It was as though the planet itself was holding its breath. For a moment, everything seemed to pause. Earth, gripped in the grip of an impossible fate, was silent, except for the growing hum of the destabilizer. Then the ground trembled. We don't have much time, Wells shouted. Her voice was strained, urgent. We've got one shot. If we fail, Carter didn't need to hear the rest. Failure was not an option. He could feel the weight of every soul on Earth pressing down on him. The fate of humanity, of existence itself, was in their hands. He could feel the pull of the rift, the way it seemed to hunger for their world. A flash of light erupted from the destabilizer as the amplifiers activated, sending a beam of raw, chaotic energy toward the sky. It streaked across the heavens like a comet, a shimmering, unstable arc cutting through the atmosphere. The energy poured into the rift, crashing into the swirling darkness, with a deafening roar that shook the ground beneath them. For a split second, everything stood still. The air was thick with tension. The rift seemed to pulse, expanding and contracting as if unsure of what to do with the attack. Carter's heart hammered in his chest as he watched, waiting, praying for something, anything, to happen. Then, The rift shuddered violently. A shockwave blasted outward from the rift, a wave of dark energy so powerful it swept across the planet, warping reality with its touch. Cities crumbled, skies turned black, and for an agonizing moment, it seemed as though Earth itself might be torn apart. Carter's team scrambled to maintain control as the destabilizer's power crackled and surged. Every light in the room flickered. Every system screamed in protest. But then, something unexpected happened. The rift began to contract. Slowly, at first, as though unsure whether to relent. The entities within it screeched in fury, their forms twisting and distorting as the rift closed, shrinking down to a fraction of its previous size. Carter watched, his breath caught in his throat, as the massive shape of the dark entity at the center began to disintegrate, its form unraveling like smoke. It was working. The destabilizer's power was overwhelming the rift. The entity, the terror that had sought to unmake reality itself, was fading, unraveling into nothingness. But just as the rift was about to close completely, the unthinkable happened. A voice, hollow and ancient, reverberated in Carter's mind. "You may have closed the rift, human, but this was never our true plan." Carter froze. The voice was not Zorath's, nor was it anything human. It was the voice of the entity itself, something that transcended all understanding. The shroud served their purpose. The rift was but a door. But we are the end. And now we have left our mark upon you. You cannot undo what has been done. The rift exploded in a flash of blinding light. But instead of consuming the world, the explosion pierced reality. It wasn't just energy. It was a tear, a scar in existence itself. The rift did not close completely. Instead, it warped, leaving a permanent fracture in the fabric of space-time. Carter gasped, feeling the weight of the voice's words. Their victory had come at a terrible cost. The entities were gone, their power fading into the void. The rift was shrinking, but the damage was irreversible. The world was not the same. It could never be again. As the last remnants of the rift flickered out, the skies above Earth cleared. The oppressive darkness lifted, and the first rays of sunlight shone through the wreckage, casting long shadows across the broken land. But as Carter stood there, looking at the ruined world, a question lingered in his mind. The shroud were gone. The entities were vanquished. Yet the scar in reality remained. And with it, a deeper mystery. Had humanity truly won? Or had they only delayed the inevitable? The silence that followed was deafening. But for the first time, Carter knew one thing for certain. This wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning. The scar in reality was just the first clue. Something darker, something even more incomprehensible, was still waiting. And humanity would have to face it, whether they were ready or not.